All right. Well, again, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Philip Yeski. I'm the Science and Alliance Officer at UMDF. I'm joined by my colleague, Nicole Wilson. Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
And Nicole is celebrating a birthday today. So very nice to turn 29 on March 29th.
Right. It's
Congratulations.
golden birthday.
That's
My golden
right.
birthday. Yep.
So Nicole has joined us. She moved into the role of mitoSHARE Registry Coordinator a few months ago. And Nicole, any thoughts on your first few months in this new role?
It has been a lot of fun, Phil. I've learned a lot about many different things. And what's really funny is that I've been with UMDF for 14 years, but I feel like I always learn something new. So this job really gave me that opportunity to really learn a lot of new things than all the really awesome things that we do as an organization. So it's been a really great couple months.
Well, super. I think we're really fortunate to have someone with your experience move into this role. I think for those who have joined us, Nicole and I really very much work as a team on the mitoSHARE patient registry. So today, I think you'll see that. I'm going to provide some opening comments, kind of set the stage for why the registry is so important. Then I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to share some of the insights on what we've learned in the first year of mitoSHARE being open. I know today we have a mixed audience of some folks that are already registrants and participants in mitoSHARE. And to those folks, thank you very much. We very much appreciate your engagement and participation in the registry. But we also have invited and hope that online we have other members of the patient community, caregivers and patients that haven't had yet a chance to check out mitoSHARE or to sign up. My goal for today is that you learn a little bit more about why the registry is important, how it works, and that at the end of this, you decide to join us on this journey of collecting patient information. So let's get started. Again, this has been open 1 year. I can't believe 1 year has gone by already. But I remember putting this slide together when we were launching the registry about the benefits of mitoSHARE. And I think this is really important in that it begins with making the patient voice heard. That's really at the core of what this patient registry project's about, and what a lot of the scientific programming at UMDF is about, is capturing the patient voice to ensure that everything we're doing as a foundation and that's taking place with regards to therapeutic development is well aligned with the interests of the patient community. So a data-focused project for patients and caregivers is a great way to make your voice heard in terms of what's most important to you. Of course, clinical trials are a really important component of getting therapeutics for our mitochondrial disease patients. And so our ability to identify and characterize patients to potentially participate in clinical trials is another really important part of what mitoSHARE accomplishes. We help with the diagnostic journey through genetic testing curation. We're going to talk about some of these things as the webinar goes on. Because the platform also incorporates the option of having clinicians join and be associated with their patients, it's also an opportunity to facilitate clinical care, which is really an important goal of the UMDF and our roadmap for mitochondrial disease as well. And there are many tools associated with mitoSHARE. Once you join, there's journaling to be able to just capture your thoughts in a free text form that's only for you to see. But you also have the ability to track medications, appointments, symptoms. All of these can be used for research purposes in a de-identified way. And you can also upload your test results so that you have one central resource for all of these important medical documents. So, those are some of the benefits. And I think those that are using the platform are probably in the best position to really share. So if you're a member of mitoSHARE, I think one of the most important things you can do is to share with your peers, other members of the community, where you find value in the registry and how you're using it so that everybody can benefit from that. Next slide, please. So briefly, just to, again, set the framework for the registry, a reminder that this is really a research study. That's what mitoSHARE is. And there are multiple types of accounts. We're looking to recruit caregivers of mitochondrial disease patients, mitochondrial disease patients themselves, and physicians taking care of mitochondrial disease patients. I think the most important message is this is the registry for all members of our community, that no matter where you are on the diagnostic journey, you are welcome and encouraged to join mitoSHARE. That may be carrier status with no symptoms. That may be only symptoms with no yet clinical diagnosis. Perhaps you have a clinical diagnosis, or you do have a genetically confirmed form of mitochondrial disease. There's room for everyone underneath the umbrella of mitoSHARE, and we feel it's really important to be inclusive and bring all of these stakeholders together in one place as members of our community. In terms of the kinds of data that we collect inside mitoSHARE, there are, of course, some baseline information like demographic information and diagnostic state. But you also have the possibility of sharing your electronic health records, actually importing them through a portal. We're now rolling out patient reported outcome measures. We're moving towards now the beginnings of a natural history study for mitochondrial disease patients. And all of these things some of the examples you see listed here in the center column are just examples of how, by collecting these data over time, we build a much better picture from the patient perspective of what it means to live with mitochondrial disease. For the research community, what this means, because this is a robust, rigorous research database, is that we can provide access as appropriate to academic researchers, industry investigators, regulatory agencies, and other patient advocacy groups to help facilitate the use of your data. The last thing we want to do is capture data and then not make it available for use in research. So the promise from our side is we will always be very cautious about how we make the data available to ensure it's being used for a good purpose, but we will waste no data point. It will be put to work. And then lastly, I think it's really important to mention privacy is the #1 goal. This is an IRB, so an Institutional Review Board approved protocol that I'm the principal investigator. We lay out exactly how data are collected and how those data are used. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here over the next couple slides, just so you have an even better sense, if you're not already involved with mitoSHARE, and a confidence of how your data are used. So as you see here, when you first create an account with mitoSHARE, the very first step will be signing an informed consent. And some of you perhaps have experience with informed consent and visiting a doctor or participating in a clinical trial. This is no different for mitoSHARE. It's a research study that has a protocol associated with it. And my responsibility as the principal investigator is to lay out the goals of the study, and then to inform you as to how it works, and then ask for your consent, right, to continue. So there's really two parts of the informed consent. The first is the information sheet, as I just described. That's a lot of the background information about, what's the purpose of it, how's my data collected, used, who owns the data, which, by the way, you always own your own data and you're in full control of, what you can expect in terms of time, any potential discomforts or risks, benefits, and who to contact. In this case, Nicole and I are the contacts within UMDF for stewarding mitoSHARE. But the consent piece is most important, because this is the point in the registration process where very clearly it's laid out what you are consenting to, and we will require you to agree to all of these covenants as they're described in order to proceed. Rather than reading these all in detail to you, I tried to just capture the key concept to the left of it, and I'll run through those really quickly for you. Currently, mitoSHARE is only in English, meaning that to be able to consent to participating in it, be able to participate in the surveys, et cetera, you have to attest that you speak English, read and understand it, because it's a single language. Now, that is very much on our roadmap to change going forward, because we do have a very global international community to be able to do this in other languages. But currently, you have to consent in English, and all patient-facing documentation will only be in English. You need to understand that, like any research study, you may not get direct benefit from being part of the registry. We hope you do, but more importantly, it's understanding that the sharing of data helps everyone and not just yourself. It is 100% voluntary, meaning that you can leave it at any time. Your data can be taken out of the registry. You only have to inform us and the technology provider of your wishes, and we'll happily remove you from it. We hope you don't decide to do that, but it's always in your control. UMDF has to have the ability to recontact you once you've joined the registry, to make you aware of important studies or relevant research to advance submitochondrial disease. And so that's captured in the consent. This next piece is called a GUID, Global Unique Identifier. And what that means is, because we recognize that you may be sharing data in multiple places, not just within mitoSHARE, we want to use identifiable information inside the registry to create a anonymized code that represents you, so that your data may be de-identified. But then using that same code in other databases, we're able to combine what you've shared into one place, and that gives a much fuller picture of the mitochondrial disease patient experience. So we describe how a GUID is created and how we use your data for that. The next sections are really the most important, though. First, it's our commitment that only de-identified data will be used for research. You will never be identified inside a research data set based on what you do within mitoSHARE, and that will look for opportunities to partner with and share with academic investigators and industry investigators to advance mitochondrial disease research. So again, we feel it's very important to lay that out very clearly, and know that your privacy is always our top priority, and that your data will only be shared in a de-identified way as long as you allow us to share your de-identified data. So those are the key components of the consent. We know the consent form can be a little bit intimidating because it's got a somewhat formal structure to it that's required by the IRB, but we are always here to discuss this. The point I just want to emphasize on this last slide is, absent a signature on the informed consent, you cannot advance into the registry and use all of the tools that I described a few slides ago. We have to make sure that everyone first provides informed consent before they start using the registry database. We are here for any questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you ever have that in the process of reviewing the informed consent. Next slide.
Perfect. Thank you, Phil.
All right, Nicole, take it from here.
All right. So now that we know how to get into mitoSHARE, we're going to talk a little bit about who's in mitoSHARE currently, and what we've learned about those participants so far. So currently we have just under 1,200 participants in mitoSHARE, which is really, really, really an exciting milestone. And at the end, you'll see what our goal is for the end of June. So this goal, or where we're at right now, is just really exciting. And we'd love to see that. So here's a little bit about the registry growth. So now you can see we currently have about 760 patients, 433 caregivers, plus 22 clinicians that are in there. And this is something that we knew was going to happen, where we knew we were going to have more patients in there than caregivers. And that's to be expected. But we definitely want to see both of those numbers go up as we reach our goals. And it'll be interesting to see if that number does get a little bit closer together. Phil, what do you think? Do you think that they'll ever kind of be around the same number?
I think we'll always have more patients engaged than caregivers, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not so worried about that mix. I want to make sure we have representation from both, though. It's really important to us that we're capturing the caregiver voice as much as the patient voice. And the other thing I take away from this graph is you can see that is very consistent growth. This is not leveling off in any way. And that tells me that this is a community that's ready to engage, ready to be a part of this. Part of our responsibility is continuing to promote this, raise awareness. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe this is something that all of us in the patient community do. Please, if you've joined mitoSHARE, you see benefit in it, encourage others in your peer group to do the same so that we can keep growing the numbers. One thing we know for sure, there are very likely in the United States alone, tens of thousands of patients living with mitochondrial disease right now at any point in time. So we're nowhere near understanding the full breadth of the mitochondrial patient space. So there's a lot of room for growth here, and I'm really encouraged. After 1 year, we got this far, and we can keep pushing it.
Absolutely. And so now we're going to look kind of at the ages of our living patient registrants. So as you can see here from this graph, the majority is the adult population, which means that a lot of that pediatric population where the caregiver could go in and add their child in as a patient is happening, but not as often as the adult population is. And of course, we want to see those numbers go up higher because we want to hear from everybody. Anybody can be in mitoSHARE regardless of your age, your symptoms, anything. So it's really important to get those pediatric patients in there so that we can have that number go up a little bit in the ages of our patients.
Yeah, and I would just say it doesn't surprise me that there's more adults. I think it's understood within the clinical community that there are more adult patients than pediatric patients. But, we do think there's an opportunity, and that it maybe requires more effort, that you have to create first a caregiver account, then a patient account, and have them associated together. But we really want to encourage those of you out there that are caregivers of pediatric patients to take the time to join so that we can capture that full voice of the mitochondrial disease patient.
Absolutely. So now we're going to take a look at the surveys that we have available and what we've learned from each of those surveys. So the surveys are listed here. We have diagnostic intake, detailed demographic, a caregiver survey, a ClinGen survey, and the last one is an MCDR eligibility survey. So once we go through each one of these, then you'll see what the surveys are asking and what information we learned from that. So we're going to take a look first at diagnostic intake. Now, this is a survey that's only for patients. So if you're a caregiver, you will not see this in your dashboard. These questions are based around your diagnosis. One of the questions that is asked, are you symptomatic or asymptomatic? This shows that 96% of the people in mitoSHARE are symptomatic, which really isn't surprising. But what's really interesting to learn is that those asymptomatic patients that are in mitoSHARE are carriers of a mitochondrial disease. So these are healthy adults or children, but they do have a genetic testing that shows that they are a carrier of some type of mitochondrial disease. What we want you guys to make sure that you know, no matter the severity of your symptoms or lack of symptoms, you're definitely needed in mitoSHARE. So if you are a carrier, you are still, we encourage you to sign up and join mitoSHARE and take the surveys as well. One of the next questions, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's really important whether you're currently experiencing symptoms or perhaps your family is just known to have a mutation that can cause mitochondrial disease, to join mitoSHARE so that we can understand, even if you're asymptomatic, your journey with mitochondrial disease. It just reinforces that, mitoSHARE is really the broad registry for all members of the community, and that we need participation from all these different corners of the mitochondrial disease community to really fully understand the perspective of both patients and caregivers.
Absolutely. So this next slide talks a little bit about genetic testing. So one of the questions that's asked in the survey is, have you had genetic testing done? 76% said that they have, and 24% said no. So what we want to make sure is that 24% that has not had genetic testing done before, get that genetic testing done, because it is a really important tool for diagnosis. So, and right now the UMDF is offering a genetic testing program that's sponsored by Reneo Pharmaceuticals. And this is a clinician ordered genetic test. So if you are exhibiting symptoms that your doctor believes would be a type of primary mitochondrial disease, and you've never had genetic testing before, and you've exhausted all of your options with insurance and you're not able to get that paid for, then your doctor is able to order these test kits to get that genetic testing done for you. This is an amazing program. So if that is you and that criteria fits you, we highly recommend reaching out to your physician, your clinician, and asking them to get this genetic testing ordered for you. It's really easy to get done. And I believe Kara will pop up the link there for you to get that testing, or for your doctor to get the testing order. And it's umdf.org/genetic testing, and that will bring you to the link where your doctor can go in and get that testing done for you. But we would love to see that yes number go up a little bit higher than that 76%.
Sure. And, again, really encourage everyone take advantage of these programs. Diagnosis is so important. We're going to talk about that a little bit more as we progress here. But, UMDF's interest is to make sure that we diagnose every patient as quickly as possible, develop the treatments and cures that are necessary to address those diagnoses and optimize your clinical care. So programs like this are really an important way of shifting the balance towards having more diagnosed patients inside the community so that we can help you even more.
And while we were just talking about diagnosis, this diagnosis, it's especially a genetic diagnosis, is extremely important for participation in things like clinical trials. A lot of times that's one of the criteria, is that you have a genetic diagnosis, because they want to make sure that whatever treatment it is that clinical trials for is going to work best for mitochondrial disease patients. The best way to know that is with a genetic diagnosis. So right now we show that 54% of the people in mitoSHARE are genetically diagnosed, 23% are clinically diagnosed, and 23% have symptoms but have not even been diagnosed yet. So those are those patients that are on that their diagnostic journey.
Yeah, and we know that can be frustrating for many patients. Please know that that's largely driven by the regulatory agencies like the FDA, that they force sponsors to define genetically which patients can benefit potentially from their interventions. So we have to play by their rules if we want to have approved drugs. That means we have to try to identify and diagnose genetically as many patients as possible so that we can help populate these trials and get these therapeutics approved.
And then we also ask, if you were genetically diagnosed or clinically diagnosed, what type of mitochondrial disease did your physician say that you had? So these are just some of the top ones in there. So just so you know, there's over 60 different types of mitochondrial disease represented in mitoSHARE of what people had said that their diagnosis was. But some of the top ones is mitochondrial myopathy, mitochondrial DNA depletion syndrome, CPEO and CPO plus, MELAS, and Lee syndrome. And then again, that 25% just are suspected mitochondrial disease. So still trying to get that diagnosis with their physician.
Yeah, and I would just add here that this is exactly what we would expect. Now, mitochondrial disease is a collection of diseases. It's rare, but it can oftentimes be a collection of ultra rare diseases. So we're going to see a lot of different types of mitochondrial disease inside the registry. That means the numbers of any specific type of mitochondrial disease might be really low. So the only way to overcome that is to have a lot of people joining the registry so that we can build up the numbers associated with any particular type. I just want to reinforce, You do not have to have a genetic diagnosis, though. We want patients that are on the diagnostic journey to join, because our feeling is we better understand your journey and what you're experiencing. We can design programs to help advance you along the diagnostic journey so that you may ultimately someday have a genetic diagnosis and have all the benefits associated with the treatments that are being developed for them. So it's really great to see 25% are just suspected now, because we know this is important to you and that will help you advance your journey. Even if ultimately that means you don't have mitochondrial disease, you're welcome in this community until we help you find the disease community that you do belong to.
Yes, absolutely. So the next survey that we're going to talk about is our detailed demographic survey. Again, this is for just patients. And this one's going to go in a little bit more detail than the general information that you fill out when you first join mitoSHARE. And this is all just to help collect and create that GUID for you that Phil was talking about, which is your global unique identifier. So it's going to ask a little bit more specific questions, because if you already have a GUID, it will connect you to that that number. It's a series of numbers, letters, different things like that it'll connect you to. But if you don't already have one, it will create it for you, so that way it can be used against a lot of different other research databases, which is really important for seeing the overall picture of mito. So it's going to look at that patient perspective, plus any of those physicians or clinician type databases that they're inputting data in for you as well. One of the other things that we're going to be rolling out too is another survey, and it's going to be called something along the lines of other personal IDs. So then that way you can put any other IDs that you may have with different databases or anything like that. So that way we're able to connect all of that de-identified information together.
Yeah, I think all of those efforts are about trying to achieve maximum value of your de-identified data. Right? If you're making the effort to create an account, whether it's in mitoSHARE or any other registry, we want to make sure that we can get maximum value out of what you are sharing with us as a part of that. And the only way to do that is to de-identify the data and make sure that in a de-identified code that we can then look in other databases to combine your data. So really important part of just maximizing the value of all the data.
Absolutely. So one of the things that's asked is your patient gender identity. And this just helps understand the diversity of our mitoSHARE registrants. And this is a statistic that's often skewed to females in medical registries. But we want to make sure that we're really hearing from everybody. So we really encourage you to sign up and join mitoSHARE, and just so that we can have a better broad representation from the mito community as well.
I tried calling out my male counterparts at the 6-month update to try and drive that number higher. Hasn't happened yet. We understand. No. For those of you, though, that do have males in your life that are, are mitochondrial disease patients or caregivers, please encourage them to join. Again, we really need a broad representation of the community. And the only way to do that is if we're, I feel it felt as if it's an inclusive place where no matter your gender, you are welcome and your opinion is important to us.
The next thing that we also ask and look at is the employment of our patients. So unable to work was one of the top responses, as you can see here from this chart. And our hope is that the registry will help advance research so that those that are able and willing to work are able to. So then that number unable to work goes down, and all of the other ones can expand to full-time, part-time, whatever it is that you want to do. We just want to make sure that one day we'll be able to give you guys the best quality of life for our patients, because that's what's most important to us.
Yeah, I think this is very representative of what we know about mitochondrial disease. Very much a spectrum, right, of symptoms, a broad range of genetic abnormalities. The impact of that can be a disease that is more chronic and manageable, or could be extremely acute, meaning severe, and highly disabling, to the ability to be employed. And so I think we see that in our numbers. Again, it's really important for us to be able to look at the demographics and see what the quality of life is for our patients. And an important part of quality of life is to be able to be employed and provide for yourself or potentially for a family. So thank you for sharing these data with us.
One of the other really neat things about mitoSHARE and what we've seen is that we have now 29 countries that are represented in mitoSHARE. In this heat map here, you can see where it breaks down a little bit. So of course, the United States is representative of over 83% of the mitoSHARE participants, but some of the other countries that are higher in the numbers is Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, Romania, and Brazil. So those are some of the other top countries that we have represented. But again, this is really important to see that we want to hear from globally. So no matter where you are in the world, as long as you're able to speak and understand English, that we encourage you to sign up. And then one day when we're able to really make it more inclusive, where we can have a lot of different languages in there, then this number, I want to see that we have somebody from every country would be my end goal.
Of course, mitochondrial disease does not discriminate based on residency or citizenship. It's a pathological disease that is present everywhere on the face of the earth. UMDF's goal is to advance the treatments and cures, to try and bring treatments for all forms of mitochondrial disease to all mitochondrial disease patients, no matter where they're located in the world. So we are very appreciative of the folks that are outside the United States that have already joined the registry. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to do more to make the registry even more friendly towards international participants for whom English may not be their native language.
All right, so next up, we're going to talk about is the caregiver survey. So now this survey is only intended for caregivers. So if you're a patient, you will not see this in your dashboard. But the other thing that is important to know is that caregivers who have a patient attached to their record, meaning that they're the caregiver, but their patient's also in mitoSHARE and those records are connected, you'll be able to see this. And the patient also needs to be a living patient. So it's a currently caring for a mitochondrial disease patient. So that's when you'll be able to see this in your dashboard. If that is you and you do not see them in your dashboard, please let us know and we can help connect your records or get your patient registered so that you are able to start seeing some of those caregiver surveys. And it's registry@umdf.org, or my email directly is nicole@umdf.org. So the first caregiver survey that we have is called the Zaret survey, and it's a standardized survey, and what they consider the gold standard for caregiving surveys that's out there. So it's a really important to know that this is a very standardized survey that really does help us see the burden of caregiving. So when we look at who completed the survey, we see that 36% of the caregivers in mitoSHARE aren't even eligible to take the survey. So they wouldn't see that in their dashboard. Out of those who are able to see it, that's representative. About 20% took the survey, 80% have not yet. So our key takeaway to this is if you see the survey in your dashboard, please take the survey so that we can really help see that data. So it's really important for you to complete this survey. Next up is some of what we learned from the survey. So the questions ask a little bit about how sometimes people feel when they're taking care of another person. So we know that that can be burdensome in general, and we understand that it can be even more so with mitochondrial disease patients. So, but we also understand that different times of year, that burden can change. So if it's more around holidays, things like that, where things are busy, that burden may feel a little bit a little bit more. So this is why we're going to relaunch the survey every 6 months. So once you take the survey, 6 months later, it'll be available for you to take again. And this just helps us see how it can change over time. So this one just shows how the burden does change, and it goes from mild, moderate to severe. And the higher those numbers is the more severe. And then the lower ones are the ones that are of a more mild type of burden. So that's how that shows in that.
Yeah. And, I think there's a lot more we can learn from these data, and that's why we need even more caregivers to participate. But just looking at the early data, the limited participation so far, caregiver burden is skewing more towards moderate to severe. And this is important for us to understand. I think this helps to inform from a patient-focused drug development perspective, which aspects, right, of improving the quality of life of mitochondrial disease patients also has the benefit of reducing caregiver burden. We're really trying to look at this holistically at a family level, and that anything we can do to help the patients also helps the caregivers and the surrounding family. So again, we need your voice, we need your participation to understand the aspects of burden that are most troublesome for you, so that we can think about the programs and the interventions that are of greatest potential benefit.
One of the next ones that one of the other surveys that we offer as well is the health and development survey, and it's called our ClinGen survey, which is also another one of those national surveys that are launched. So it's a standard survey again, and this is really developed just to create a snapshot of all the participants' overall health. So some of the questions are going to be organized by different body system: digestive, immune, cardiovascular. And you're going to start with one survey first, and it's a general health survey. And depending on how you answer those questions, other surveys will become available to you. So this will make a little bit more sense when you see the next slide here, which shows that out of the 225 people who did take this survey, that was the general survey that I talked about first, it breaks it down into those other types of surveys. So that's showing, and it's asking you about symptoms, basically. So we see that eyes, muscle, digestive system, brain, those are some of the top symptoms of our mitochondrial disease patients. And that should not come as a surprise to anybody, because those are what takes up the most energy. And we know that mitochondrial disease is an energy disease. What is the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, fundamentally energy and function of the cells. And I think back to when I first became active in the mitochondrial disease community and with UMDF. Some of the first materials I remember seeing are, if it's 3 or more systems, think mito. And that's not always true. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it does convey the general idea that oftentimes mitochondrial disease impacts multiple body systems, multiple organ systems within the body. Because these are deficits of energy, fundamentally, that's what the mitochondria principally do within the cells. All of the major organ systems that require the most energy, like the eyes, the muscle system, digestive system, brain, I think it's fully represented here, are most impacted by mitochondrial disease. So by using this ClinGen survey structure to first identify which systems you're experiencing symptoms within, and then ask some additional questions about the types of symptoms, the onset of the symptoms, the severity of the symptoms, and then doing that over time. On other webcasts, you've probably heard me talk about natural history data and how important that is to any disease community that's trying to have therapeutics developed for it. We have to understand how the disease progresses over time in the absence of interventions without any therapeutics, because then as therapeutic candidates come along, we can see how the natural history changes over time to show the improvements that occur within it. So from my perspective, putting my research hat on inside the registry, this is the most important place where we need your engagement, right? As a caregiver of a minor and understanding their natural history, or as an adult patient, please take the time to share what symptoms are you experiencing, fill out the additional information, and then we're going to come back and ask again, because the only way we can really build natural history data is to do that in a longitudinal way, meaning over time.
Yes. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about genetics, what we've learned so far from the genetic questions that we have in mitoSHARE. So again, we've mentioned this before, but 76% have self-reported that they've had genetic testing done. Of that 76%, 54% have a genetic diagnosis. So that could just mean that that genetic testing may have shown variants of unknown significance. So that may not have been discovered yet. But that 76% that have had that genetic testing done, they could possibly be MCDR study eligible. So Phil, do you want to tell us a little bit about MCDR with
Sure.
CHOP?
Yeah, as usual, we have these acronyms that are, alphabet soup, but mitochondrial disease sequencing data resource, MCDR, is a research study. The PI is at Children's Hospital Philadelphia, Dr. Marnie Falk, who is a geneticist. And the goal through MCDR is to try to aggregate, bring together as many different genetic data sets as possible to better understand the genetics associated with mitochondrial disease, help those patients that don't yet have a diagnosis to get to a diagnosis. And importantly, for the clinician researchers, it's the ability to say, here's a group of patients that all had heart-related problems, and they all have this specific mutation. That may be a new type of mitochondrial disease to be researched. So it's incredibly important that we build up a genetic repository as much as a health repository as in the registry. So we're very honored to be the entryway for the MCDR study, that anybody that joins mitoSHARE has the possibility, based on eligibility questions, to potentially join the MCDR study and have your genomic data donated to MCDR and used for research purposes.
Yes. So if you do take the survey and it comes up that you are eligible, your next step would then be to email CHOP, and that information's listed there for you if you are eligible. Make that reach out, and then someone from CHOP will coordinate with you to get you enrolled into MCDR.
That's actually a really important point, and that the UMDF inside mitoSHARE, we're not bringing the genomic data together inside mitoSHARE. We're simply trying to facilitate participation in this important study that's taking place at CHOP, the MCDR study.
Absolutely. So we know that about 200 people self-reported that they had a diagnosis that we kind of talked about before. And 280 of those people have had genetic testing done. But we only have so far 86 genetic tests that have been uploaded. And of those 86, they've all been curated so far, which is really great. But what this tells us is that we still have a lot of people that have had genetic testing done who haven't uploaded that result to get what I think is probably one of the coolest benefits of mitoSHARE, which is getting that genetic testing put into a summary report, which is really easy for you to understand. It's easy for you to share with your family, with your doctors. Any of the doctors that you're going to, you can give them this really easy to understand genetic report. And it's all done free through mitoSHARE. So it connects you with a licensed genetic counselor from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. They'll look those over, and then they'll pop that back into your mitoSHARE account for you. And this is really important as well for as a research database perspective to collect that key information in a very consistent way as well. So this is really, Phil, I think is a really, really neat benefit of mitoSHARE.
No, I agree with you, Nicole. It's perhaps the most important component of it. Because
Yeah.
one of the learnings from the previous registry we ran is that when you ask patients to find their genetic testing report, locate in the report where a specific mutation or heteroplasmy level or these very clinical terms are listed, you don't get accurate data all the time, understandably, because those reports are not written in a patient-friendly way. So this program is meant to address that. We need the very specific information. We need it in a very specific form to be entered into our research database so that we can use it for research purposes downstream. But for you, the patient, the return to this is, as Nicole described, a summary of the most important aspects of the report written in a lay fashion so that you can better understand your diagnosis where you are on the journey. And again, you do not necessarily have to have a confirmed mitochondrial disease to benefit from this. If you're suspected of having mitochondrial disease, but you've had genetic testing, we encourage you to upload as well. I know we say only 86. I'm thrilled that 86 of you have made the effort to do that. We understand many of you may not even have a copy of your lab testing report any longer. These are all things that can be overcome. As a patient, you have full rights to your report. You have full rights to your data. Through this process and the mCDR process, we can help you to get a copy of your report. So please, participate in the mCDR eligibility study. If you have a copy of your report, upload it for curation. That will make the database stronger. And in the end, it'll make you a better informed patient.
Absolutely. And one of the other important things to remember as well, that only patient accounts are able to upload those genetic tests to get those curated. So if you are a parent of a child that you would like to get that genetic testing curated, then they would that child would have to have their own account, not meaning they have to have their own email. You as a caregiver can still control that, but they would still have to have that patient account. So, and we can help you get that started.
Yeah, I probably should have mentioned this in the introductory comments. We know that many in our community are both caregivers and patients, right? And the registry understands this too. If that is you, if you're taking care of a family, right, or someone else in your family is affected, but you also have mitochondrial disease, when you register, we'll ask you to register as a caregiver, but identify yourself as a patient. You'll actually have a dashboard that then allows you to participate as a caregiver and a dashboard that allows you to participate as a patient. And we'll need informed consent for both of those because we're collecting research data based on both of those roles in your life. So please, again, take advantage of features like this within mitoSHARE. I think this is a true win-win. It helps you as a patient be better informed, and it really helps us to build out the breadth of our research database.
Absolutely. So now we're going to talk about what's new and what's going to be coming up next. So when we did the updates, well, when Phil did the update 6 months ago, he talked about that mCDR was something that we were going to be rolling out, that eligibility study, and that is complete, so that's good. But we're also going to be working on some additional patient-reported outcomes. For the caregivers, we talked about that burden of care survey. That has been rolled out, and that just came out in January. But we're also working on some other different surveys for caregivers, such as grief. And some of the other things, which I find really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing these, is those first set of mitotypes that'll be identified, and it's specific or targeting specific types of mitochondrial disease, and that's in development right now. And I think that that's really going to be a great way to really learn more about mitochondrial disease as well.
Yeah, let me maybe just speak to that a little bit more. And I know we had a question around this. I've described mitoSHARE as the all are welcome broad umbrella registry. If you're going to participate in only one patient registry within the mitochondrial disease space, we would ask for it to be mitoSHARE so that we broadly understand all the various types of mitochondrial disease. We can find commonalities between these different types of mitochondrial disease. And yes, we can also understand differences between them. So to help facilitate that aspect, we think it's important that we have this broad structure, all types of mitochondrial disease, all across the diagnostic journey, but that we're also able to go deep in specific areas, understanding that mitochondrial disease is probably 300 plus different diseases at this point. Even something like Lee syndrome is really a collection of 75, 100 different mutations that make up Lee syndrome. So we're going to try to develop studies and surveys that help engage the Lee syndrome group, how it might engage the MELOS group, how it might engage the subpopulation of POLG patients, et cetera, et cetera. All of these are important. We think that the most valuable way to run a registry like this is to help you understand how you're part of a broader community, but also how you're part of a more specific community related to mitochondrial disease. So that's going to be an important part of how we advance mitoSHARE going forward.
Absolutely. And speaking of going forward, the next slide is going to tell us all what our goal is for the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th, and that's 1,400 registrants. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're nearly at 1,200. So hitting that 1,400 is completely achievable, but we can't get there without you. So if you are not a part of mitoSHARE yet, and you would really like to be, and we encourage you to do so, please visit umdf.org/mitoSHARE to get signed up today. And I'm always available to help you get signed up as well. So if you're running into any questions, you have more questions about our consent form, anything like that, and I would be happy to help you. Again, it's registry@umdf.org or Nicole@umdf.org.
Yeah, couldn't have said it any better, Nicole. Whether it's 1,200 or 1,400, these are all important milestones. They are to be celebrated. We are so fortunate to have a patient community that's responding to this, engaging, and that's growing on a daily basis, but it's nowhere near the end station. As I mentioned, there are tens of thousands in the United States, and if we look at a global basis, there may be millions of patients that are affected by mitochondrial disease. We have a lot of work to do. It's a challenging disease, but it's only by gathering data, and from my perspective, importantly, that we're getting patient-derived data that complements whatever is being collected by clinicians as part of clinical research too. All of these data sets are important. So please, if you haven't yet had a chance to check out mitoSHARE, we ask you to do that as soon as possible and to consider registering. We're here to answer any questions. That includes through me. And for those of you that have, we're going to keep trying to increase the value of the registry, find new ways to engage you, to even more fully characterize your life with mitochondrial disease. And thank you in advance for whatever effort you put towards that. We're deeply appreciative.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Nicole, we had a couple of questions that came in, and maybe I'll just kind of quickly address them. But we don't have a lot of time today. Again, any other questions, feel free to send them to registry@umdf.org, as you see on the screen. We did have a question about other registries are out there, and I think this is important to note. I mentioned this earlier. There are many different databases, and they may be clinical research databases. It could be a clinical trial. It could be something like MCDR. It could be a registry run by another patient advocacy group. All of those represent valuable data points. And part of what the GUID, G-U-I-D, that we described allows us to do is downstream of the registry is to bring data sets together and make sure that we're not duplicating data points, right? Or that we're adding on new data points in an appropriate way. My message always is, this is the broad registry for all mitochondrial disease patients and caregivers. Please join here. But we totally understand that there may be other registries that you choose to join as well. Know that we are always focused on collaboration and achieving maximum value of the data we collect. So we're always going to look for ways to bring data sets together. Reach out if you have any questions about that overall strategy.
Absolutely.
And then Nicole, there was a question around eligibility for caregiver surveys. Do you want to just speak to that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there really isn't any eligibility questions that are in there. It's just in how you set up your account. So if you go in and set up your account as a caregiver and you also added a patient on to your caregiver record and that patient is living, then you would be able to see that caregiver survey. So that's kind of how we set up the survey to work so that it was only hitting the correct caregivers in the database.
Yeah, so I think that's going to wrap it. Nicole, thank you so much for your contributions. Again, really thrilled to have you as a partner on this project. Thank you to those of you in the patient community, caregivers, patients that have already joined mitoSHARE. If you haven't yet, please check it out. As you can clearly see, we're trying to grow the registry as quickly as possible to make it as valuable as possible. The faster we can do that, the more data we can collect, the more quickly we can get to those treatments and cures that we all desperately want for our loved ones that are affected by mitochondrial disease. So I think that's going to wrap our one-year update. We'll look forward to bringing you additional updates as we go along, and we are here to answer any questions. Thanks everybody for joining today.
Thank you.